This morning I'm going to take you guys on a field trip, and I have to start off just with a little warning that I'm going to show a side of my life that people on social media typically don't see. What I'm hoping to do is I'm hoping to kind of pull back the curtain and give you a little peek at what Mormon privilege looks like. This is a life that I once lived full-time, 24/7. And then I left the Mormon church, and then I left my husband, and then I became homeless and all of the stuff that my followers know. And I now live a very different life, except that there are times in my life when I reconnect with that Mormon tribe of mine, and all of a sudden I am catapulted into the privileged life once again and am in the middle of it all. And today we're going to kind of draw back the curtains, and I'm going to show you some things, and I'm going to talk about what it all means as I wake up with views of the world in Park City, Utah. First, as I give you a little sneak peek at my guest accommodation, let me define privilege. Privilege is being given opportunities or advantages over other people, usually because of power, wealth, or connection. I myself no longer have power or wealth, but I'm connected to people who do. And that power, wealth, and connection has created a phenomenon within Mormon culture that most people don't even begin to understand. Of course, there are going to be people watching this video who will say not every Mormon is wealthy. There will be Mormons who watch this video who say, I'm certainly not wealthy. Yes, granted, not every Mormon is wealthy, but Mormonism has created a funnel of wealth that is unprecedented. Let's go see where it starts. Welcome to Salt Lake City, Utah. Today, this is the home of a multi-hundred-billion-dollar church, but it was once an outpost in the wilderness for Mormon pioneers. While other Christian sects promote missionary work and charity work, Mormonism is very unique in that it just promotes work, just plain old-fashioned work ethic, hard labor, get stuff done. That's almost entirely because of early church doctrines around Zionism. Mormon pioneers had to work hard to survive because as they were converted in their hometowns in England and New York and Ohio, they were then called to leave civilization and gather, and the ultimate gathering place ended up being Utah. So Mormon doctrine specifically promotes hard work. I spent my life as a Mormon singing hymns like "Today While the Sun Shines," "Work with a Will," and "Put Your Shoulder to the Wheel, Carry On." And as that work ethic became really baked into Mormon culture, Mormons began to see the results of hard work, which is wealth. Early on in Mormon history, the Mormon prophet had to start reining people in by reminding them, hey, we're supposed to be focused on heavenly treasures and not just the fortunes that you're amassing here. If you're interested in a much deeper dive, check out the book, The Mormon Way of Doing Business, where the author dives deep into some of the most successful Mormons of all time, including presidential candidate Mitt Romney and JetBlue founder David Neeleman. In this book, David Neeleman explains how his Mormon mission, another powerful tool for Mormon success later in life, set the foundation for literally everything that he ever did the rest of his life. He talks about how having to wake up at 6:30 in the morning and work until 9:30 every night for 2 years, as well as learning how to connect with both the poorest of the poor and the richest of the rich, gave him all the skills he ever needed to become the Steve Jobs of the airline industry. I think that when people are watching Ballerina Farm, they're picturing that Hannah's family lives in some rural, tiny little town out in the middle of nowhere. But no, they're about 15 minutes away from Park City, and they live in some of the most affluent ski country in the entire United States. This is not small town America. This is a rich boy's playground. How do young 30-somethings even afford this lifestyle? Mormon privilege. David Neeleman had all the tools that he needed to create wealth. He then passed that wealth and the work ethic on to the next generation, giving them access to things that most people don't have. You guys, I just drove past the dairy and Daniel was walking across the street holding Flora Joe. It's kind of weird to see social media come to life in real life. Part of me wants to turn back around and go ask if I can take a picture with them. And yes, I could have turned my camera towards them, but I don't want to film people without their permission, even if they're walking across a public street, because that's an invasion of privacy. I'll just drive back by and see if anyone's out there and see what I want to do. This is a beautiful place to live. Oh, there's their adorable cows. And somebody just left the house on an ATV. You guys, in my rearview mirror is Ballerina Farm Hannah. And here's the dairy. Hannah just waved at me as I drove by. This is beautiful, and everybody in the world wants to live here. We would all love to live here. Ultimately, we end up with a phenomenon that we don't see anywhere else in the United States of America. A massive religious community that relocates en masse and settles in the wilderness where there is no civilization already, who are commanded to be industrious. And suddenly the Mormon pioneers go from persecuted to privileged overnight. Add to that a couple of other factors. The land was free. All they had to do was fill out applications for homesteads, and boom, free land. Between 1847 and 1900, the Mormons created 500 settlements across Idaho, Utah, Arizona. Another factor that we simply can't ignore is the Mormon stay-at-home mom. The stay-at-home mom lifestyle is very privileged. You have to have the money for the woman to stay home, and she becomes then a personal assistant to the husband, often furthering his career. She's able to manage the household, take care of things, live frugally because she can make homemade food rather than having to eat out all the time. Studies show that where there's a stay-at-home mom, where they have enough resources, they're not living below the poverty line, that stay-at-home mom contributes greatly then to the success of the kids. She acts as their personal assistant. One of my children plays 13 different instruments. All of them were in lessons and performances and recitals and sports. I was there to help them do their homework and really make sure that they were successful in their lives. Just having a stay-at-home mom in the home gave my kids a level of privilege, access to things that some of their peers simply didn't have. And if you rewind back to the Mormon pioneer days with polygamy, having multiple wives, while that is a lot of children to take care of, they were also labor within the family. That forced labor really grew a lot of the early church leaders' empires. Brigham Young in particular, he had polygamous wives managing some of his ranches, watching over some of the storehouses. He just assigned his polygamous wives to do pretty much everything. There are a few other notable factors which contribute heavily to Mormon privilege. One of these is just brand loyalty. Mormons trust other Mormons, especially if you're like a temple-going Mormon, and especially if you're in Mormon leadership, which then you're tapping into the power aspect of privilege. This creates an economic network that leads to more and more success. As a member of the Mormon Church, I did business with other Mormons as much as I possibly could. My dentist, the guy that did my tires, my housekeepers, everybody was Mormon. I made sure that my kids had Mormon school teachers. My OBGYN was in the Mormon stake presidency. It was only after I left the Mormon church 5 years ago that I had to learn how to Google and Yelp things, because I always turned to my Mormon network. I never Googled anything. I just went to church on Sunday and said, hey, who's everybody using for their nails? Mormons also have access to an extremely affordable education system. I have TikTok followers who tell me that they haven't believed in the Mormon church their whole entire lives, but they've pretended just so that they can get their education at BYU. As soon as they graduate, they're out. The BYUs are all subsidized by tithing, so they are outrageously affordable, which gives Mormons access to educational opportunities that most people simply don't have. The Mormon family itself is its own foundation for success. You'll see a lot of Mormons where all of the brothers and sisters go on missions, graduate from BYU, and then they join together to start a construction company or a dental office. Just research the Nealman family. See all of the millionaires just in that one little clan. And over on Hannah's side too with the Wrights, Seth and Jenna and pretty much everyone in her family group is extremely wealthy. Also, some of the other Mormon doctrines themselves lead to better financial outcomes, like the Mormon doctrine around credit. Mormons aren't supposed to have credit cards. You're only supposed to go into debt for your education, for your home, and if absolutely necessary, for a vehicle. I did not have a single credit card ever in my entire life until I left the Mormon church. So Mormons aren't paying interest. I never had an interest payment. That gave me a lot more money to utilize in other areas. Mormon culture also teaches humility, and there are doctrines around pride being one of the tools of Satan. So even the richest Mormons, where they may have the big house for all of their 12 kids, and they may drive some big SUV to get the kids from point A to point B, they don't typically wear designer clothes. They don't have a lot of flashiness to their wealth. So when you're not spending money on all the fluff, you are able to really, really save up and amass a great fortune pretty quickly. Prime example of this, Chloe and I were eating dinner last night at a little place right here in the heart and soul of like Park City. And as all of the Mormons got out of their fancy cars and walked up to the restaurant window to order, they were all just wearing like the grubbiest clothes. Like none of them have like fancy hair, fancy nails. It's really important for Mormons to at least act like they're being humble. So the ballerina farm vibe and all of the farm clothes, that is actually what the rich Mormons wear. Rich Mormons aren't going for Kim Kardashian. You do have the occasional one, of course. The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, of course, are a great example of that. But in general, even if you're super rich within the Mormon church, you don't want to show that wealth with costly apparel. In fact, the Book of Mormon specifically teaches that costly apparel, again, is one of Satan's tools. The Mormon church also has its own welfare system, so if Mormons fall on hard times, they don't have to go into debt, rack up credit card bills, whatever. Their bishop takes care of them. Their ward takes care of them. They have their own storehouse. They have all of the resources that they need to get through any little economic dips without going into debt. So when you watch these Mormon influencers and people are like, oh, I wish that I had all the time in the world to bake the sourdough bread and chase all of the 8 kids and all this stuff, all I can think to myself as a former Mormon and still in so many ways a beneficiary of extreme privilege. And by the way, this is all one house. I would estimate this thing is maybe about 50,000 square feet. When people watch these Mormon influencers and it looks like they're just living in small town America, and it looks like they're just scraping by and struggling to make ends meet like the rest of it, it just makes me want to scream, because I've spent my whole entire life in the middle of it all. Look, that one over there is even bigger than this one. And I know what's behind the camera. I know that there is a lot of privilege that has contributed to the life that these people are living. And as rich as they are now, let's see what the next generation looks like, because they're only getting richer.
Everybody in?
Yep, let's hit the road. As for me and my kids, it's back to reality